Interesting story that you told that I thought was really telling was the story about when you pass that bar and those people are outside and they're motherfucking you.
Yeah, waiting on an Uber. One guy's like, "Hey, Lance," and I was like, "Oh, this guy wants to say what's up." I'm like, "Hey, what's up?" And he goes, "Fuck you." I was like, "Whoa, all right." And then all his buddies got up, and it was girls and guys, so they were like chanting. I'm like, oh my God. Like, I was enraged. Finally, the Uber pulls up, and I got in the car, and I was so mad. And I'm sitting there just fucking stewing. I'm like, I have to take action. So
Right.
what's action? Turn around, go find 5 other guys and turn around and see what happens? No. I mean, what's action? I got action for you. That's when I called the bar. And I told the manager, the manager was great about it. He's like, dude, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, I'm totally sure. I said, but you tell them it's on me, and then I understand.
Right.
And that to me was taking action.
This show, you've already read the clip. If you're here, that's probably not a barrier to entry, having Lance Armstrong on. I'm sure some people saw Lance Armstrong and they didn't click on the podcast. And I know that. You know, I got to know Lance through Waterboys. He reached out to me, sight unseen, trying to get in on the fight for clean water. He was doing a vodka in Aspen and wanted to donate a portion of the proceeds to Waterboys. And this is like out of left field for me. And of course, he's a polarizing figure. So that's a loaded interaction the first time I talked to Lance. I didn't know what to expect. And it's not like I've talked to him a bunch, but we talked on the phone one day for 30 minutes. And I like to take people at face value. I like to meet them where they are. I don't know cycling, so maybe for me it's easier. You know, I'm not a fan that was disappointed, you know, in real time. I didn't experience that visceral reaction that so many did. And it's easy for me to look in context and say, hey, doping was done on a large scale in cycling. And, you know, I take that at face value. Maybe I'm being too pragmatic. Also, I think being a pro athlete, you see behind the curtain. So the magic is already gone for me and others that put on a helmet or played in front of millions of people, you know, in some other sport. Like, we know what the business is like, and sometimes the business is ugly, and sometimes there are things that the public doesn't know about the business. Certainly in my sport, doping is not prevalent. Performance enhancement is done in the shadows. You know, we hear about guys getting popped, but that's not a thing that most guys in the locker room are acutely aware of happening, because I don't think it's happening on a widespread scale like cycling. So do I hate cheaters? Yeah, but I think everything's relative. If cheating's the norm in your sport, I have to look at that in context. And, you know, like, anger is love disappointed. And that's what I feel like is the crux of this thing with Lance Armstrong. He was a hero. Like, he was Captain America in a sport where Americans were not dominant. And he was this kid from Texas that came out of the blue and was like nothing we had seen. And I think we all got wrapped up in that thing a little bit naively. And when it all came crashing down, what you get is a visceral reaction. And I never got that because I wasn't following the sport. The people that he torpedoed in the aftermath, that's a tough one for me. And that was a tough one for me preparing for the interview. In preparing for the interview, I watched a lot of other interviews, and I found that despite what I'd read in the comments or what I'd read on Reddit about Lance Armstrong, he has apologized for his transgressions. And it has been a long time. He's also done a lot of good, okay? Like, I know some of you guys are rolling your eyes when I say that. I'm not trying to humanize the guy. I'm not trying to make him a hero again. I said that during the podcast. I said, listen, Lance, like, redemption, I don't like the word, because redemption would allude to the fact that you have an opportunity to be a hero again. You're not going to be a hero again. And I think that's okay. Even if all the money that they raised in cancer research was built on a relative lie, it's still for good. And that might not sit well with people, but money for research for one of the leading causes of death on the planet, I think it, you know, it doesn't matter where it came from. If his career was built on some sort of a lie, I don't think the idea that he cheated and that he was a great philanthropist are mutually exclusive ideas. I also don't think the idea that he was a cheater and that he survived cancer are mutually exclusive ideas.
Or that he was a great athlete.
Or that he was a great athlete. We talk about that. Like, you know, to be Lance Armstrong and get stripped of, you know, your medals or whatever it was, you know, there was one race they had to go back to 27th or 26th to find a guy who wasn't doping. Right. So there are advantages, relatively speaking, that he had that were natural and that were based on, you know, I think a rare drive and work ethic. Even if he couldn't package that in a way that he wasn't a monster at times. I think ultimately Lance Armstrong is a killer, man. And I mean that through the lens of sports or business or anything competitive. I think that's how he came up. And he said this, he had a hard time turning that off in the wake of everything. You know, the self-preservation, if you're a killer and you've been protecting a lie that you think is justified because of the regularity with which the lie occurs in your sport, it might be hard to turn that off. I'm not excusing it. He acted like a child. He's admitted that. But when I met Lance, I thought down to earth, regular, like kind of disarming, definitely emotionally barricaded. That's one thing that comes through with him is the guy does not know how to humanize himself well. And, you know, although I said this to him, you seem not to care about what people think, but I think you do care about what people think more than you lead on. Contrition's a funny thing in this country and in general. Like in America, we forgive people. We do it well. You know, I don't think we get enough credit for that. You know, in the age of quote unquote cancel culture, which I don't think truly exists, I think it's important to remind ourselves that we have forgiven a lot of sports figures. Like sight unseen, we don't even talk about it with some people, what they've done. And, you know, I wanted to make this a conversation that hit everything. And for me, I was nervous about taking the interview. I got notice that we would get the interview 3 days in advance. From a research standpoint, for me, as somebody who doesn't know cycling, that's daunting. But what's also daunting for me is, do you take the interview or not? Even though I've talked to Lance, even though I'm somebody that believes that, you know, there are value in conversations like this, regardless of how you feel about Lance Armstrong, I knew that some people would say, don't take the interview. Ultimately, I decided to take the interview because I think you would want me to take the interview. You, the listener, would want me to take the interview, and you would want me to ask questions about the ugly. So I did that, and I didn't want this to be a puff piece. And, you know, like, my job is not to cross-examine Lance Armstrong. The facts are all out there. There's no discovery period going on right now. I'm not Oprah in 2013. That's not my job. There's nothing to uncover. He cheated, and along with many others, he cheated, and he acted like a child in the wake of the cheating. But contrition, again, interesting concept. We love to forgive. I don't think he's very good at convincing people that he's contrite. And I think part of that is he is a little bit emotionally barricaded. And I think part of him really believes that some of what he's been demonized for has been discussed without context. The doping part of it. Mm-hmm. That's not what this interview is about. This interview is not about me digging contrition out of Lance Armstrong. This interview, as I told him before we talked, is about having an authentic conversation. That's my job, to have a complete, authentic conversation. And if I were to sit down with Lance Armstrong in a coffee shop and I were to ask him everything I wanted to ask him, 30 to 40% of that is going to be about everything bad that he did and that happened to him. And when I told him that, he didn't balk.
And one interesting part, this was early on, this is kind of how you started things, was that you said a lot of people said I shouldn't take this interview. Yeah. And him talking about that and being understanding of that was really interesting. It
was interesting, and it was a just to take you behind the curtain. Like, this is one of the tougher interviews I've had to do because of how loaded it is, and also because it's outside of my purview as an analyst. But I will tell you something, and this isn't me tooting my horn. I am extremely self-conscious and lack confidence sitting here doing this podcast, expressing my thoughts, my takes, you know, setting out on a monologue like this or having a conversation with my friends. But when it comes to interviewing, I can do that. I can interview anybody. And it's something that I want to do at a high level, and it's something that I want to make hay doing over the long term. So for me, taking an interview like this is a no-brainer. You know, when I got into this, I knew it wasn't just going to be interviewing people that everybody's going to love. And ultimately, if you don't love the fact that he's on the podcast and you don't love everything I've qualified, that's up to you. If you don't like Lance Armstrong, that's up to you. But I think we did this interview in a way that we hit the ugly stuff too. And it was a fun conversation. It really was, because it's pretty rare that you get to talk to somebody that's been to some of the heights and some of the lows that he's been to. Again, not a redemption story, but a story. And I think stories are worth telling. And there are worse athletes than Lance Armstrong. I'm just going to say that. I mean, like, there's an ugly side to so many sports stories. And I feel like we aren't consistent in how we want these stories covered. And for some reason, the Lance thing is extra loaded. I'm fine with that being the way it is. And so knowing that, we tried to do it the right way. Enjoyed talking to him. Here's Lance Armstrong. All right, we are here in Austin, and when you look at a list of people that live in Austin, when you come to South by Southwest, your name's up on top of the list, man. You're like kind of Mr. Austin.
I've been here long. It's interesting. I've been here long. I moved here in 1989.
Yeah.
I got out of high school, and but then we moved away. And we just moved back. So we took a little break. We took a break when everybody else moved to Austin.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I moved down here in 89, it's funny, where we're sitting, like my very first flat, I mean, we could all walk there in probably 3 minutes.
Yeah.
I rented this little place. I paid $300 a month.
Yeah.
There was a government here, the state capital, and then there was the university.
Yeah.
And that was it. There was nothing. Michael Dell was just dropping out of college and creating an empire, but there was not, it wasn't like it is today. We didn't have traffic. You could ride your bike, not worry about getting run over.
Yeah.
But it's been good. It's look, people complain about most people complain about growth if they live in a place that they love, but there's a simple answer, and that's just basically move to a shithole, and then nobody will move there. Right? Yes. I drove in, I didn't see any drawbridges,
right.
So people want to come.
Back in the 80s, is this like a cowboy town? Easy place to get your ass kicked at a bar?
No, it was a college town.
Yeah.
It's always been, I mean, this has been the liberal bastion of Texas, and to some degree still is, although that has changed with the influx. But no, this has been a super progressive, it's also been, as they've built it, the live music capital of the world. I mean, going back to the late 80s, early 90s, you could see anybody. I mean, the clubs that we had were many of which are not around anymore, just because of the growth. But you could roll up and stumble across Stevie Ray Vaughan, or
did you?
Yeah, I did not, but you could. I mean, if you walked
big
into
Stevie fan. Yeah,
if you walked into Antone's on any given night, he might just be there sitting in or just playing a gig. Like it was pretty epic.
So you got the podcast going.
Yep.
And this is probably a good place to have a podcast, yeah. I mean, a lot of the guys in the industry, comedians and stuff down here.
Yep.
It's called The Move.
Well,
Okay.
there's two. There's The Forward,
Okay.
which was the original one that I did. I started that was had nothing to do with cycling. In fact, that was the intention. And so that one I started here in Austin, and you could pick up people, but just because Austin was, people were coming through. That show, I've faded a little on that show just because of moving to Aspen for 5 years. You don't get the cadence of interesting people coming through, although there's a lot of interesting people. And then COVID. Like COVID, I don't love doing interviews on Zoom, although I've done some. And then years into that show, we launched the cycling show called The Move, which was really on a whim, just to kind of, just to basically fuck around. And that show's ended up being a hit and being much bigger than the original show, The Forward.
So back me up to when you started The Forward. Why? Like, why start talking?
My manager at the time just said podcasts were starting to become a thing. That was early days of really just anybody being able to create content, thank God.
Right.
And before we started, we talked a little bit about TV. If you've led the life that I've led and you led it 30 years ago, and you cannot create your own content and publish your own content and distribute your own content, you're screwed.
Right.
You're sitting around waiting for somebody to call you to give you a platform. But so, going back 8 or 9 years, Mark said, just start a podcast.
Right.
Anybody can do it. And I was like, all right. So that's really how
That's
started.
what I heard too.
Yeah. That's the truth. That has the added benefit of being true.
Yeah.
And it's look, I tell people all the time, like, thank God we live in, we can look at all the fucked up reasons and unfortunate things out there in 2024, but you can also have, at the same time, you have to look at the good stuff. So it's been good for me, for sure.
What surprised you about sitting down and talking to people? Because I feel like you've gotten good at sitting in this chair, where you've had to field some tough questions and you've had to hit some tough topics, but you're the one holding the microphone.
Yep.
Anything surprise you about being in the other chair?
I was never a big homework guy.
Right?
in any, I only went to high school or got out of high school, but yeah, I never studied. I study more now for a show than I've ever studied my entire life.
Likewise.
Yeah, and so it's, and some days, you know what it's like. Some days it flows. Some days, you have somebody that you're super interested to talk to. There's other days you're like, yep, take it or leave it, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's, but at the same time, I always get, and we chatted on this earlier, like I always get a little nervous I don't want to screw it up. And I certainly don't want to ask somebody to come on the show and, number one, not be prepared.
Right.
And number two, just not do a good job. I don't want to waste their time.
We talked about being nervous. I was nervous on 2-3 days notice to get a big interview like this because, like you said, like the homework part of it, there's a whole world of cycling that I am not aware of. And watching interviews with you. Yeah, exactly. I was like, this could be fun for you because I don't know shit about what you did for the most part. I've watched the documentaries. Obviously, some of them center on, more negative topics. But, I said this to you when you walked in. I was like, some people think it's a bad idea to have Lance Armstrong on the podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How does that make you feel?
I don't, I think that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, it's, look, I've lived a crazy life and I still live a crazy life and I travel the world and, I've managed to reinvent myself and support my family, which is the most important thing. And I tell people, and I mean it, I don't really give a shit because I woke up as me today.
Right.
And no part of me woke up today and was like, damn, you got to be you again?
Yeah.
Or no part of me last night went to bed like, dude, can you just wake up as somebody else? I like waking up as me. So part of that is just a comfort with the journey that I've led, a comfort in my own skin, and also a piece that I'm just not for everybody. Like I'm a polarizing guy. Maybe that's shifting over the years. It doesn't really matter, but I'm not going to sit around and get mad at somebody for, I don't know how many mean tweets you're going to get over this. It's going to have zero
I'll get
effect
some,
on me.
but
that's fine.
But my job is not to sit. Like when we talked, I was like, my job is not to cross-examine you. Everybody's heard everything,
Right?
But I think there are people that, from you, and like I've heard it because I've gone back and I've been like, what did Lance say about this? Like when somebody asked him this question, did he take accountability? Was it a good answer? And I have found the answers that I feel like I've needed to hear to know where your head's at.
Yeah.
But I think it's hard for people because they don't get it all in one place. Mm-hmm. And so maybe they didn't hear you address this topic or that topic. I think for me, cards on the table as an athlete, and I said this to you, the doping in Peloton never moved me. And I think maybe because I understand the context of how it was being done. It's like, as an NFL player, if somebody's quote unquote cheating, it pisses me off because it's not prevalent. I mean, it is prevalent, but it's in the shadows. Mm-hmm. It didn't seem as mainstream as what was going on in cycling. So that part of your life, I don't hold that over your head. Not that I have the authority to do that 15 years later.
Right.
It's just not in me. And I think part of it maybe comes from the fact that I wasn't a huge cycling fan. Yep. Do you feel that dichotomy, where there's people like me who don't know the sport as well, and we seem to digest your transgressions or whatever you want to call them differently than people that were so passionate about the sport. Do you feel that difference?
Look, I mean, on the football thing, whether or not, I mean, look, I love football. I love watching football, I should say.
Yeah, I think people want to hear about that too.
Yeah,
so
I feel like it's tough. I grew up in Dallas, so it's been tough being a Cowboys fan.
Everything, it's all cyclical, bro.
It's been
you had a good
won a
childhood.
Super Bowl since 1996. So whenever that cycle decides to roll around, that'd be great.
Yeah.
We can all do the math on that.
Right.
It's been a long time. But if some mysterious doctor showed up in the game of football and gave all the players a 10% advantage with something that was undetectable, I can promise you what the league would do.
Right.
I can promise you what the teams would do, and I can promise you what the players would do. And unfortunately, that's not good, right? And unfortunately, that's what happened to us. And so it's hard to judge that unless you were there. It's hard to, if you weren't in the battle, it's hard to know.
And know what you would do.
Yeah, I mean, and what your options were, right? I was a kid that got out of high school and, like I told you, moved down here and then went basically straight to Europe. So I wasn't coming home, right? I looked around, I was like, fuck this, I'm staying fight.
Right.
And so...
and the money was good.
The money got good over time, for sure.
Well, the thing that struck me about is like trying to put the decisions you made in context is like, I grew up with money. My dad, he was you, where dad wasn't around, did not have a lot of money, would pass his dad on the way to school, sleeping in a car. And I try to put myself in your shoes coming from that place and looking at six figures and saying, I know the way my dad is. Mm-hmm. He counts every dollar. He still thinks he's going broke.
Yeah, well, that's a healthy way to approach it.
And
I think some of the most successful people do. I mean,
and he was different. He was different in the 80s because he was desperate. Yeah. And not to say he was in the same situation, but I think it helps me understand why you might make decisions that now in retrospect seem to some people selfish or like cheating,
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to describe it or look at it. But it happened.
Yeah.
And it took its toll on many of us. Not so much physically. I mean, that's the irony in all this. If you look at thousands of test samples or subjects and over many, many years, physically everybody's in one piece. Psychologically, not everybody is, right? I mean, all of my main rivals, the ones that we all drove each other, couldn't handle the downfall. Yeah. And so that part tears me up. But at the same time, I look at my life and I had the biggest downfall. Right. But I wasn't going to give up. Yeah. And I wasn't going to give up on myself, and I certainly wasn't going to give up on my family. And I was going to hang in there, man. Just keep trying.
Interesting story that you told that I thought was really telling was the story about when you pass that bar and those people are outside and they're motherfucking you.
Yeah, it's the only time that's ever happened, but it's a good story.
Well, isn't that always, it's interesting because one of the questions I was going to ask you, and maybe we'll get there in a second, but was you've got a lot of detractors. Do these conversations play out in person or usually hypothetically in your head when you walk into a room and you're thinking, part of you, I know you say you don't give a fuck, but part of you's got to wonder when you walk into a room, is that guy on my side or against me?
No, I don't.
You don't?
I do not think that way.
Really?
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
I have plenty of people on my side.
Yeah.
I've managed to rebuild my life, and that's not a brag, by the way. It's not a flex. It did happen that one time in Denver, which was totally surreal.
Yeah.
Have there been times where I'm I feel like that group over there wants to motherfuck me?
Right.
but they're not.
Yeah.
Sure, but that's all right, dude. I mean, it doesn't bother me, and I think a lot of that comes just from this understanding and almost empathy in a way on my side of just understanding. I'm not a fool. I understand.
You understand the feelings.
I understand. I understand. I mean, what are the feelings? The feelings are hurt, betrayal, all of these things that fans would have had. I understand that.
Yeah.
If I didn't understand that, then that would bother me.
Right.
If somebody, look, we're in the business. I mean, I spend most of my time investing other people's money.
Right.
Right. In order to do that, you have to go through literally thousands of similar processes of pitching your fund, asking for support, telling your story. And a lot of people say yes, and a lot of people say no. And a lot of people say no for the very reason that you're Lance Armstrong.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yep.
I say, I get it.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to the next person now.
Right.
And they might say the same thing.
Yeah.
And I get that too. Then I'm going to go to the next person. It's just about, that would be a complete waste of my time to dwell on that or to get sad about that. I don't, that's fine. I told you a second ago, like, Lance Armstrong is not for everybody.
Right. And that's probably freeing when you come to that
Totally.
conclusion personally and you say, you know, the best thing I can do, because I've done things I regret.
Yeah.
And I dwell on them, you know, and obviously they're not things that are broadcasted to the world like yours.
Yeah.
And I can ruminate on them. But eventually you've got a choice where it's like that's not changing anybody else's day.
Right.
So why would I give my happiness to this problem?
Yeah. I mean, it'd be a problem if I came home and my kids acted like that, if they started motherfucking me.
That's who matters.
Although they might some days, but that would be a problem. It would be a problem. The other thing about this, Chris, is, I sort of, quote unquote, lost half of my friends through all of that.
Yes.
Which is a terrible feeling.
That's probably the worst part. I would
Yeah,
imagine.
you're like, whoa, I thought you guys are all allies and friends and supporters, and now you're gone? Which, that sucked. You can't deny that. That was a long time ago. It sucked at the time. But then you look around the room, and half the room is still there.
Right.
So then you're like, okay, so this is my team. And all right, thank you, and we're going to rebuild this thing together in whatever form or fashion that is. Now, it would suck if all of a sudden half of that half room left, but that there's something super strong and empowering and healthy about knowing just who wrote it out with you. And so, you lean into that stuff, and just totally cool with and understanding of people's disappointment. It's okay.
Now, the people that I'm sure it hurt a little bit more to lose in that room were people that maybe you felt like you drove away. I mean, I could see somebody saying, hey, well, Lance, the doping's one thing, but how it was handled after, and I've heard you talk about this. Mm-hmm. You referred to yourself as a bully. You said, hey, I'm not proud of that guy.
Yeah, of course.
Obviously there's some acknowledgement of a separation between that person and the guy sitting here today. Like anybody, 12, 15 years later, we all change. Isn't that a motherfucker? And on top of that, being a pro athlete and then not a pro athlete, which for me, when I was a pro athlete, I was different.
Yeah, you would have run through a brick wall.
Yeah, and I would have protected myself.
You were paid to be that guy, paid to be competitive, as was I. But if you're not aware enough to know that there is a time for that and a time not for that, and you don't have an on-off switch, that's what happens. And look, I fully I think by and large, if the people that don't understand that this was fully pervasive have not been reading.
Right.
So let's just work off the assumption that everybody's cool with that.
Yes.
You then get into the behavior part, the attitude, the denials, the vehement denials. That bothers people, and so that's a lifetime worth of work for me to live with other people, and that's again, that is okay. And it's, look, I didn't just ride my bike for 11 years and do all the things I just told you I did and not think about this.
Yeah.
I mean, I've also had a super fucked up life, and not a lot of people have had, way harder lives than me, but our life wasn't easy. So I haven't just sat around. I've gone and done deeper work to understand how these things have been put together, and also figure out a way just to manage the trauma of the last 11 years. I mean, you cannot have lived that life and not have trauma. So I love that shit. I mean, I'm totally cool to try whatever and do whatever and talk about whatever.
Well, you said you don't give up. And, I think part of it is like not giving up on your own journey, whatever that is. And I think there's a lot of people that say, well, redemption, that's a word I don't like using with Lance because that would imply that there's an opportunity to be a hero in a big way again.
Yeah. That's not going to happen.
And that's not going to happen.
No.
And I think that's fucking okay.
I'm totally okay with that.
As a
By the way, I didn't really like the life of a hero.
Yeah, okay.
I worked for a bunch of other people.
Yeah.
I was told what to say. I was told where to go. Guess what? I say whatever I want now.
Yeah.
I go wherever I want.
Yeah.
I do whatever I want.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm not trading.
Yeah.
If you gave me Paris 2005, I would not trade.
Yeah.
Sitting here today in Austin, Texas, during South by with you, there's no fucking way I trade. Zero chance.
And there's no way to trade it because
Obviously there's no way to trade it.
but
But I don't know if some genie came in and said, dude, you want to go back to that? And nobody knows anything and you're the most powerful athlete in the world. But hey, you got to bullshit a lot and you got to lie and you got to deny. I wouldn't trade it at all. No way.
Well, I mean, you get into the lying, and I feel like anytime I've told a lie, you get into self-protective mode, where it's like whether people know what's been going on under the surface or not for a long time, you've been swimming really fast under the surface, but above water, you're calm, and then the whole thing gets blown up. And
I don't.
Do you go into that self-protective mode?
I wasn't that torn up about that part.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody had to try to keep that secret.
Yeah.
Which was ultimately going to be impossible to do.
Talking about that night at the bar, and this is the last thing I want to talk about on this stuff, because there's so much interesting and really good about what you've done. And, that story outside the bar struck me because of really 2 or 3 reasons. One of the reasons was, all right, so for people listening, Lance goes by a bar, and forgive me if I'm butchering this, but people are motherfucking you outside.
Yeah.
And
15 of them.
Yeah, and they're like, fuck Lance Armstrong.
It was like a chorus.
Yeah, yeah. And you get home and you call the bar and you say, hey, here's my credit card. I want you to buy their drinks. I want you to cover their tab. Was it a big tab, by the way?
I don't know.
You didn't even look?
It doesn't even matter.
Well, what that story says to me, Lance, is that, like, number one, there's some acknowledgement there, which obviously watching your interviews, you've acknowledged a lot. But then, two, that you do care on some level what people think. And I think that's natural.
Yeah, I actually think there's some of that. I think, so just to get granular, I was waiting on an Uber.
Okay.
We were doing a show.
Awkward wait.
Yeah, I was waiting. I was like, where's this fucking Uber? Hurry up, please.
Fuck, Lance
Armstrong. And the guys, one guy's like, hey, Lance. And I was like, this guy wants to say what's up. I'm like, hey, what's up? And he goes, fuck you. I was like, whoa. Mm-hmm. All right. Still waiting on the Uber. And then all his buddies got up. And it was girls and guys. So they were like chanting. I'm like, oh, my God. Like, I was enraged. Mm-hmm. And I'm getting to me, really the moral of this story. I wanted to, and it would have been a bad scene because I was obviously outnumbered. I was like, and I was with Liz, who's photographed me forever, and she knows me better than anybody. And she's like, finally the Uber pulls up, and she's like, get in the car. Because she sees me. I'm like, I'm going to go over here. Let's go. Like, I'm going to get destroyed, but I'm going to try.
Yeah.
And I got in the car, and I was so mad. And I was mad because and everything was in slow motion too. You're like driving away. I'm like, dude, you didn't do anything.
Right.
You didn't take any action. Right. I mean, I like to think that I take action.
Yeah.
I'm like, you didn't, and I'm sitting there just fucking stewing. I'm like, I have to take action. So what's action? Turn around, go find 5 other guys and turn around and see what happens? No. I mean, what's action? I'm like, I got action for you. That's when I called the bar. That was me taking action.
Yeah.
Like, and I told the manager, the manager was great about it. He's like, dude, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, I'm totally sure. I said, but you tell them it's on me, and then I understand.
Right.
And that to me was taking action. Yeah, that was like top 3 surreal moments of my life.
That's insane. I mean, and it doesn't usually happen in person, which
and it
is
spread.
what
So it was in Denver. We were in Rhino. It's a little. It's kind of the hip part of Denver, and word spread so fast that, like, I didn't tell anybody. I mean, it was in the 30 for 30 just because they found out. But we were in an Airbnb very similar to this, and doing podcasts. And my guys, just like you have your guys right here, walked out the next morning to this coffee truck. And the guy in the coffee truck saw them walk out of the Airbnb, and he said, "Are you guys with Lance?" And they're, those my guys, they're like, "Yeah." And they're like, the coffee guy's like, he's like one of these hipsters, and he's like, "Is that true? He did what he did yesterday?" And they're like, "Yeah." And the coffee guy, this total hipster's like, "That's the coolest fucking thing I've ever heard." And so, like, it just spread, like, so. Anyways, hasn't happened since, and it might happen again. I'll probably do the same thing.
So it's not your responsibility to humanize yourself, but you do make efforts, even if you don't want to act like you're making an effort. I feel like you make more of an effort than you lead on.
I mean, I just, I make it up as I go along.
Right. I'm not saying it's phony, but what I am saying, there is an effort to humanize yourself a little bit. You're doing a podcast. You're out there. You're talking.
Yeah. Well, I'm not. I'm ambitious.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had to be ambitious.
Right.
Right. I wouldn't be sitting here in the position that I'm in today if I wasn't ambitious. So, look, I touched on my peers that have been wildly negatively affected by their own downfalls. Those were the same guys I raced that I beat.
Yeah.
Because I was more ambitious. It's the same gene.
Yeah.
Right. I beat them, and I trained harder than them and was better than them because I was more ambitious. They would admit that. The ones who are still alive, many of which are not alive. And so it's the same gene, whether you're just trying to put food on the table for your family, which is my number one goal, because there were many days where I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to feed 5 kids.
Right.
I don't know how I'm going to keep a roof over their head. I got to figure this shit out. That's ambition. And I think, I don't know, I would support anybody in doing that.
Has it been tough? I've talked to my dad about this. Like you alluded to having a fucked up life earlier, and I'm pretty sure you're alluding to some of the things early on, and then, obviously the last 10, 15 years have been tough, but without a roadmap, being a dad, I mean, you had a stepfather who, I mean, that's pretty well covered. But without that real blueprint, you've got 4 or 5 kids of your own now, 5 kids.
Yeah. But sometimes, yes, all of that is true. And there was not, like, I see my relationship with my children today. And I think dads are different with sons than they are with daughters, and moms or vice versa, the whole thing.
Yeah, for sure. Especially being your son.
And so,
the pressure.
So sometimes not having a roadmap or a blueprint, all is not lost, right? Because the way I viewed it was, okay, well, this is, I know what I didn't have.
Right.
And I'm smart enough to figure out, well, if I didn't have that, then that's what I have to provide.
Right.
So, my relationship with my children is so special.
Yeah. How about the pressure of being, your son or your daughter? Have you picked up on that, sports or out and about?
Look, that's it's. I have 2 sets of kids. So I had my kids were older. My older kids were in middle school when when this all happened. And my younger kids were 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And so it's easy to think that they were sheltered or shielded from their father's very, very public story. The middle schoolers obviously were not. I've just kept an open book with all of my children. And I also knew that even a child who's 1 or 2, and the easy thing to assume is that they missed it. Nobody misses anything anymore, because everything this conversation that we will have today will live forever.
Right.
It lives forever. So for me to think that my children that were 1 and 2 at the time would not grow into their father's history is ridiculous. So I knew that they would grow into it. And so it's been the same approach with all of them that, hey, but it's also not I don't think it's a burden on them. I mean, a lot of I don't ask my children like, hey, what do your friends think? Do they think your dad's, but you just pick it up.
I don't mean that do their friends think you're a dick. I mean,
no, they think it's cool.
Everything you've accomplished, because you have accomplished a lot. And, like the way I look at it, I said this, I called you, I was like, man, I don't know dick about cycling. We got together through charity. That was really cool. You with your vodka and kicking us back a portion at my foundation. And we obviously had Anne-Marie, who was, used to work for Livestrong and worked for me and spoke highly. So my only foray into you is charity. And obviously understanding what you were able to accomplish. And you just alluded to the fact that even with the doping, you feel like, and I think from reading and people that know what they're talking about, they're like, yeah, he was different. And I think it's the work ethic, but also for me as a novice, I'd like to understand better physiologically what's different about you. If somebody were here like, nah, he wasn't different, listening, tell them why you were different. Like I've heard about a lactate something, you've got a fucking giant heart. There's all these fabled physiological features of Lance Armstrong.
Yeah. Well, nobody, the good news is nobody that I either trained with or competed against would say that he wasn't any different, right? And so that's ultimately, people ask me like how I view my wins. Well, I view them as wins,
right?
Because there has to be a winner, and as it stands today, based on whoever makes the rulings, there's not a winner. You can't have an event like the Tour without a winner. That's like having that's like going back and disqualifying Tom Brady or somebody and not giving it to somebody. They would never do that. But there are a few physiological things outside of just a very, very healthy appetite for pain and suffering, which I still love to this day. But the lactate thing you alluded to was super important. Look, cycling the Tour is 3 weeks long. It's 4 to 6 hours a day. It's a very dynamic race. It's not a marathon. It's not, it's not the 100-meter free where you are dictating your own pace. You are at the whim of the rest of the group. So we're only 9 guys. There's 200 guys in the race. So the race moves and flows a lot.
Yes.
And you cannot dictate that no matter how good your team is. So lactate is a constant. If the peloton decides that we're going to go hard either on a crosswind section or on the climbs, they're going to go hard.
Yeah.
And so lactate is always a part of the equation. And, the easiest way to, I guess we should also define or describe a little bit.
I know what I think.
You know what lactic acid is, but the easiest way to describe it for the listener is if you just went out anywhere around your house and you found the steepest hill you could find.
Right.
It doesn't matter what condition you're in. You could have not exercised your entire life. But just imagine for a second that you stand at the bottom and you start sprinting as fast as you can up the hill. It doesn't matter. Again, you could be a couch potato or you could be an elite athlete. It doesn't matter. You're sprinting. Ultimately, you're going to slow down, and then ultimately you're going to stop.
Right.
And the only reason you're stopping is because of lactic acid filling your muscles, and you just can't move anymore. The muscles slow down, and then they stop. So the ability to buffer that was a big advantage of mine, which is just a natural God-given gift. Had nothing to do with substances, nothing to do with any of that. That was unique, which, by the way, I didn't know that I had that.
Yeah, when do you find that out?
Yeah, you find it out in your 20s when you start getting tested and you're doing physiological testing that then dictates the training, so you could then dictate the training zones.
But you're on the cusp of that probably coming up in the 80s.
Yeah.
Like where there's actually testing that's modernized to the point
Yeah,
where
you would go in a lab. It would be done in a lab. As the technology advanced, you could do it on the side of the road.
Yeah.
I mean, the other weird one I think is just femur length. Like to get really weird about it. I have longer legs than I'm not very tall. I'm like 5'10" and a half, I say.
That's that's a combine height right there. You took the half and everything.
Yeah, so I have longer legs than I do a torso, so therefore the femur is longer.
Yep.
Therefore the lever is longer.
Yep.
And so once with the long lever, like if you gave me a kid who had a great VO2 and you looked at him, you're like, wow, his legs are a little longer than his torso. Look at his femur. His femur's the kid has potential.
That's what you're looking for.
I mean, I don't think they're looking for it, but if somebody rolled up like that, I'd be like, oh, yeah.
Well, it's like in the NFL, you know, you see the combine times and measurements, but I'm always interested in things like ankle flexion. You know, what degree can you bend that can you dorsiflex? You know, like that's big for a pass rusher. Or leg length relative to torso height. There's a lot you can glean there, and I feel like in your sport, there's probably those markers that you're like, hey, physiologically, this guy's got
and
the
I
chops.
don't know what they're doing now I don't even know the process they go through the kids come up through the junior ranks, and they basically make their way there through results.
So the thing about the 90s in watching these documentaries and reading, to me, was like, obviously doping was rampant, but the most interesting thing to me was like the gamesmanship and the intimidation. It almost like when you think of cycling as an alpha, football player, meathead, see guys riding down the street on a bicycle, you're like, I'm tougher than those guys.
Right.
Even though they are from an endurance standpoint, I mean, I would cry like a baby doing what you guys did. But I did not realize how much gamesmanship and intimidation and mental warfare you guys waged on each other. Yeah,
and you have 20 teams. I mean, look at politics, right? You have two parties. Look at the gamesmanship there. Look at the tactics. Look at the.
Can we have 20 parties?
It might be better. At least 3 or 4.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it is constantly a political game, and that political game changes every day.
Yeah.
Right. There may be, stage 3 where you are aligned with some other team, so you find a natural alignment there, and you can work together without even saying it. You just both know that this is in both of your interests. You could get to the very next day, and all of a sudden those interests totally change.
Non-verbally.
Yep.
You just know.
Now, sometimes it is discussed, but there are many times it's just understood.
When you came across the greats and they're eyeing you up and sizing you up, the American, the young guy, whatever reputation you had, could you feel the bullseye? I'm not talking about the doping stuff. I'm talking about just showing up and racing next to Lamont or whoever it was.
No, he was racing when I started.
Could you feel the I'm gonna fucking take this kid's soul if I can?
Not Lamont. He was at the end of his career.
Yeah.
He was about 20 pounds overweight.
Yeah.
And didn't understand why he wasn't competitive. I'm like, everybody else can see it, but
right. What is that? How does that happen? You just discipline slips, or yeah.
I mean, yeah. But I also started my career when right in the middle of Miguel Indurain's run of 5 tours. So Indurain was this big Spaniard that destroyed people on the tour. But was very quiet. He was always a gentleman. But just to watch him and watch the way he went about business and just fucking destroyed people on the climbs, in the time trials, everywhere. Like, you're like, damn. You just see it. So, but guys like him were great. Others were tougher. I was not a shy. I mean, I was a 21-year-old kid from Texas that was like, didn't know anything about cycling. I'm like, fuck y'all.
You're the outcast.
Yeah, I'm like, let's go.
Yeah.
That doesn't play well with classic traditional cycling, European cycling. you're supposed to come in and keep your mouth shut.
So that's not the norm.
No. And I won the world championships when I was 21 against Indurain. Got second.
What year is this? Because he was early 90s,
1993.
Right? Yeah. He was like the Cowboys.
He was like the Cowboys, man.
He has not won since.
He is not, but he hasn't tried either.
No,
so
exactly.
The Cowboys have tried.
They try it every year.
We're not talking about the Cowboys.
Yeah, no, not yet. But yeah, I got to loosen you up before we get to the Cowboys.
I'm loose. I'll talk about what. Before the Cowboys.
Now's the time, Lance, where I ask you the tough question. What does Jerry Jones do at quarterback? No,
oh boy, I should ask you that.
Fuck, dude, you're kind of. You understand the situation, right?
Well, Dak wants a new deal.
Yeah. Well,
they're thinking about giving him a new deal.
They're up shit's creek, basically.
They totally are.
They don't have a choice. They got to pay Dak and hope for a different result. But, anyways,
people are like, we don't want to hear.
They're like, fuck football, man. This is a football pod, but fuck it. Like the nationalities, they all had different personalities. I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, and languages.
And
look, you played a game where you could trash talk somebody across the line, and you damn sure knew he was going to understand you. We didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, we had at any given time, you'd have 20 different nationalities.
Yeah.
I mean, we had my final year, 2005. I think we had just on our team 7 or 8 different nationalities. Our 9 guys. There was only 2 Americans. George and I were the only 2.
Translator?
Well, we were an American team, so guys were expected to speak English.
Try to learn the language, yeah.
So we used
which is, of course, the
English.
hardest fucking language to learn.
Yeah, but our director, who was like the Bill Belichick of cycling, he speaks like 5 languages. So I would during the race, if he really needed to get a message through the race radio in our year, if he needed to get a message across, he would say it in their language.
Wow.
And he's Belgian, so and the staff was Belgian. It was just this. By the way, it was fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Like hanging with those guys.
Yeah.
Like people are like, how was it like to race and to win that? I'm like, had to do that. That was my job. But like, dude, let's talk about time in the bus together.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the dinner table, talking shit about the table over there that we're gonna wake up tomorrow morning and beat the hell out of. Like that was fucking training camps.
Yeah.
Nobody there, just us.
Yeah.
Like fucking destroying each other.
Yeah.
It was like, that was fun. They're still to this day. 90% of them are like brothers. 90% of those guys would put the suit back on right now.
Jeez. When it comes to the time leading up to the tour or something, you guys are at the dinner table the night before. Like, where was your head at? I know what it's like being an athlete leading up to a big game, but I had one every week.
Right.
I feel like you look forward to one event the entire year.
Yeah.
Well,
we race all year, but
there's one big one, right? Or a few big ones that you're like, is the closest correlate golf, not from an athletic standpoint, but you've got your Masters, you have your U.S. Open, you have the big ones.
The Masters is the Masters. The Masters is the Tour de France. There's 3 other majors.
Yeah.
You could argue the Open is almost as big as the Masters. I think if you ask the players, they'd much rather win the Masters. I love golf. I could talk about golf. Fuck football. Cycling. I could talk about golf all day long. But there are, the Tour of Italy is the second biggest race in the world, and it's 10% the size of the Tour de France.
Wow.
The Tour of Spain is the 3rd biggest race in the world, and it's 10% the size of the Tour of Italy.
Yeah.
So it drops off quickly. The Tour is the granddaddy, for sure.
And when you're leading up, it's different.
Yeah, you lead up all year long, but
yeah.
That's the one that matters, especially for an American team with American sponsors. I mean, nobody walking the streets of any city in this country knows any other race.
Yeah.
They just don't.
Yeah.
They know the Tour de France.
How about this guy, Jan?
Yeah.
Seemed like a guy you really respect.
I mean, he was my number 1 rival.
Right. Brought something out in you?
Absolutely. He scared me to death. I mean, he was Jan Ullrich. and we can talk a lot about Jan. He's become a very close friend of mine.
Yeah.
Who was not a very close friend of mine. When we raced, we were cordial. I didn't have his phone number. He didn't have mine. We didn't communicate. We'd shake hands at the start, maybe at the finish. No communication.
Yeah.
But it was just this level of very mutual respect and fear. I know nobody scared me like Jan. And so that fear is what got me up every day. I woke up every day thinking about another man.
Right.
And I was like, what the fuck is Jan Ullrich doing today? How's he looking? What's he doing? What's his training today? What did the scale? I mean, so much of our sport is what the scale says when you first wake up. Like, you got to be as light as possible. I'm like, what did he see when he got on the scale this morning? Because I know what I saw. I know what I'm gonna do. I know I'm fucking scared. I'm gonna do everything I can and use that fear to motivate myself. And dude, he was, and he had incredible talent. This kid was from. And hopefully it comes to the U.S. Amazon just did a 4-part series on his life. I mean, he's had a very, very difficult life, most of which I did not know. I've since learned since we've become close. They sent me I did a bunch of interviews for the documentary, and they sent it to me with subtitles. So I learned so much more about his upbringing, growing up in East Germany, being the anointed one, he won the tour when he was 21 or 22. He was the biggest athlete in Germany. He was bigger than Boris Becker, and he was crazy. Like, this fucker was crazy. So not equipped to handle the level of success and attention that came with that. And but boy, was he good. He was a beast. And so but you know, I've talked about these guys that couldn't handle the downfall, and Jan was one of them. His story is, I'm not talking out of turn here. I mean, his story has been very public. Drugs, alcohol, addiction, knocking on death's door multiple times. And I leaned into that, not because I knew him and loved him and hung out with him and had his phone number, but because I had such fear and respect for him, and he really made me. And so I kind of made it one of my missions to help this dude. And it's been, thank God he's, we're now probably 2.5 years sober, totally sober.
Is addiction a big problem in that sport? I mean, just because in the NFL, obviously with the painkillers and everything, it's been a well-beaten path.
I think the ones who unfortunately haven't, who have passed, it's Pantani, Jimenez, Vandenbroek, perhaps Gaumont, died of drug overdoses. They were also the biggest name in their sport, in their country. Every country kind of had their king, right?
Yeah.
And so, but there's not a lot more of that. It was just the most high profile and the ones who suffered the most consequences, who just weren't equipped to manage that downfall. And so, and Jan was close.
Right.
Yeah, Jan was very close, and man, I fucking love the guy. He's I'd do anything, dude, to get up right now and go hang out with Jan. I would. Like, if somebody could just what are these things that move? Like,
teleport.
Yeah, just some shit like
we'll
that.
Have one
like,
soon.
Yeah, if that shit happens, like, I would get on it right now. If Jan said, "Let's go for a bike ride in an hour," I would be there immediately. I fucking love the guy.
When it comes to the mental part of it, because to me, I have a great lung capacity. We're not as specialized as cyclists, but I know from my athletic background, I'm an endurance guy relative to the other guys on the field. But if I get on a treadmill for 2 miles, I'm bored as fuck. It hurts more than the pain of the workout. I have ADHD and all that shit. So sitting and doing something for a long time.
Yeah.
I'm strangely really good at it, but I also struggle with the mental part of it, the boredom.
Yeah.
And
well, then you're never going to be able to do it.
I think the cycling career is not going to happen. But I'm just wondering, did you have a happy place? Like,
are you kidding me? That's the happiest place.
So you're already happy. When you're in pain, you're happy. When you're, because you got to be a glutton for punishment, it seems like, to do your sport.
Look, we all have some place that we lean on or go back to or know that is our happy place, right? My wife has really gotten into meditation, right? So she knows she can go to that place, and obviously you're all alone, and great things happen, right? And you could be a swimmer that just wants to go, I don't know about swimming in a pool, but swimming in the ocean, or my place is the bike. Like you, and I do a lot of it. I mean, I do all kinds of training, but I could go for an hour-long run or an hour-long bike ride or an hour-long swim. The bike is by far, it's the church, right? I can get to a good place or I can go to the gym for an hour. It's great. It's more of a process and just a workout. The bike is like therapy.
Yeah,
it's a whole nother vibe, which is also great when you is even better when you can ride alone. I do love riding alone.
Yeah, well, I mean, I like going to the movies fucking alone. I like going to dinner. Like, I don't get fucking alone's good. No, it's my happy place. My wife doesn't like it so much.
That Chris Long
he's
falling far. Look at him. He's over there all alone.
He's sitting at fucking Iron Claw all alone.
He's on his 6th vodka soda, and fuck. No, but we keep waiting for somebody to roll up. I don't know, his brother, his dad, maybe some friend of his has been on the show.
Yep.
Still there alone.
These guys see me wandering around town solo. It doesn't scare them. When it comes to the cancer diagnosis, I've heard you talk about knowing you were sick, feeling like maybe something was off, but you're competing, right? And you've got tumors in your body.
Right. Well, I didn't know it, but yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
What did that feel like? Did it feel like, hey, I'm just run down, or?
No, I didn't feel. I didn't know what was going on, so I didn't. Look, it's a hard endurance sport, so most people are in a constant state of feeling run down.
Right.
I didn't know if that was what it was, but there were other symptoms. The blurry vision, the headaches, the coughing of blood. It had nothing to do with being run down.
And then when you get diagnosed, I don't know if I've heard you talk about this. You don't seem like you're afraid of a lot. Maybe failing. I don't know what actually scares you.
Yeah, well, there you were. Yeah, definitely afraid then certainly for the first half.
The first half.
Yeah.
And what was the prognosis? Because everybody's always like, "What are your chances?"
That's what everybody says.
What were your chances?
Well, there's, and I think in hindsight, if you went back to the doctors, look, I don't think any doctor says to a patient newly diagnosed, you have no chance, unless it's something true, a really bad pancreatic cancer or a lung cancer where there really isn't a chance. Situations like this where one of the most severe cases they'd ever seen, they say, look, can't tell this kid he's got a 5% chance. They're like, it's 50-50. If you ask them now it's been, this year will be the 28th year, they would probably tell you it was about 5%. Yeah, it was bad, man. It was, my tumor markers were not the most they've ever seen, but they were high, dude. That was bad.
Did you, it would be a silly question to ask anybody else, but I feel like you're different, so I don't know where the wall is with you. But were you afraid of death?
Certainly early on, and the crazy thing is, my treatment lasted less than 4 months.
So you only had a few months to really ruminate on this thing.
Yeah, but as soon as I started to I was actively involved. I didn't just have the doctor come in, chest x-ray looks good and tumor markers look okay. And I was like, no. Put that fucking thing on the screen.
Yeah.
Like, put the original one, put the last one,
yeah,
and put this one. Mm-hmm. So I'm watching this thing. I had, 12 golf ball sized tumors in my lungs. So I'm like, okay, original, that's fucked up. The last one, which was, 2 weeks ago, going away.
A little better.
Oh, and this is today? All right, shit. I'm an athlete. Like, what do athletes do? That's my scoreboard. I'm like, I'm getting killed. I'm down by 30.
Yeah.
Oh, now I'm only down by 7.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck. This game's tied now.
Right.
I'm like, I can't wait for the next one. I literally thought that way.
Yeah.
I played it out like it was me against some opponent.
And coming out of it.
Same with the tumor markers. Right?
Yeah.
These are just numbers,
Yeah.
right? My beta HTG when I was diagnosed was 90,000. Anything over 2, yours is less than 2, mine is less than 2. 90,000 is unheard of. The next time I did the blood work was 9,000.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah.
So I kept getting energized and motivated by these drop-offs.
You treat it like it's not a sport.
Oh, I did. Yeah.
for your life.
Yeah. I was like, man, like a scoreboard.
Yeah. And when you come out of it, do you feel less invincible? Because if it would seem so natural to me to feel fundamentally
I don't
more
know. I think you feel
more invincible.
well. I think there's a period. I think there's a natural period of certainly uncertainty or just stress about some sort of relapse but once that subsides, I think you game on.
Yeah.
I felt that way.
And with all the work you guys have done, because for me, like, the other stuff is to me so separate from what you guys have been able to accomplish as a foundation. And I know it's not you guys anymore, which is a point of contention, I'm sure, for you. But you got to see the work and be proud.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I don't think. Look, I was a part of Live Strong for 15 years, and we had a good run. I mean, we raised $500 million and helped 3 million people.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's no part of my life today that's like, man, I feel like I didn't do enough.
Yeah,
I feel like that's.
You did more than enough. You did a lot by beating it.
Yeah.
Just by beating it. If you never donated $1, it's people watching your struggle and saying, "Hey, my favorite athlete, or somebody I've seen on TV is going through the same thing I am."
Yeah, and that's always my. It's not everything to me, but if you are projecting success, then in my mind, you have to think about some way to give back. I don't know how people don't think that way, right? And it's the same with the vodka. And I told you this when, the whole premise behind our vodka was that we make it with 100% aspen water. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, so what? But when you open the tap in Aspen and that water comes out, that's it.
Yeah.
That's the water. There's no magic.
Yeah.
That's the water. I'm like, fuck, how blessed are we to just drink this water, shower with this water, go to a restaurant and say, give me tap water. Mm-hmm. Like, that's sick. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. And so then in my head, I'm like, well, wait a minute. There's only 3,000 people here in Aspen that are saying that. What about all these people in the world that either have shitty water or have no water? So my head then goes to, all right, well, let's figure out who those people are.
Yeah.
And that's how we got connected. I'm like,
that's super cool, man.
I'm like, if your whole, I don't know how you can play it as that's your stick, that you have, that it's made with 100% aspen water, and not acknowledge that, millions and millions of people around the world don't have water.
It's good to have water, period. But to have aspen water?
Yeah. Right, but
that water's pretty good.
Again, there's only 3,000 people there.
And you should be drinking water in Aspen. I went to a wedding up on Aspen Mountain, and I was fucked up.
Well, that happened. Yeah, that happened on the top of Aspen Mountain.
Yeah,
yeah.
You ride the gondola up, and
so here's
7 beers later, you're like,
yeah. You want to know why that happened?
Because altitude.
Well,
what else? It was Sam Bradford's wedding. Old teammate.
The kid who played at OU.
Yeah.
That's a sweet kid. I like that kid.
He's a great guy.
He's a great guy.
One of my best buddies.
When he blew out his knee against.
Blew out his knee a couple times,
yeah,
man.
But when he was in college.
Yeah, blew it out in college.
At the Texas OU game, I think.
Twice in the pros. standing right there for both of them.
And I felt so bad because I always liked that kid, and we, obviously I'm a Texas fan.
Yeah.
And
I was gonna say for you, this is like
I know, but he just seemed like such a good guy.
You'd
and
like
my
him.
buddy was at the game with a bunch of people from Oklahoma. This is a true story.
Yeah.
You can ask him. And I said, fuck, dude, and after the game, I said, I feel so bad for that kid. And I know, and I called my buddy, I was like, I know you're with Oklahoma, they all talk to each other, right? Like that shithole. They all have each other's number.
Yeah.
I said, this is a true story. I said,
like a support group
I
for
was
living
like-
in Norman.
I said, can you get me his number? I said, find his number for me.
Yeah.
Like, who says that?
Yeah.
He got his number for me.
Yeah.
So I called this kid. I'm like, dude, I am so sorry.
Really?
Yeah, he can tell you about it.
Really?
Yep. 100%.
He's a great guy, man.
Yeah, he just seemed like it, even as a college kid. But back to where were we going? Oh, back to why you had such a headache after that wedding. Look, obviously alcohol gives you a headache, even at sea level. It gives you a headache in Denver, which is 5,000 feet. Aspen is 8,000 feet. But you were at a wedding at 11,000
Gotta
feet.
go up. Yeah.
So, your tolerance goes...
Yeah.
And I only speak from experience. I went to a wedding. I've been to multiple events up there. Dude, the next day you're like, this is the worst morning of my life.
Yeah, like what the fuck happened?
It's 11.
All right, so that leads me to my next question, because you seem to understand the human body and everything that comes along with it. How do you beat a hangover? How does like a world-class cyclist?
Yeah.
Is it just a liquid IV like the rest of us pours, or is it like
Yeah.
you guys got
Whoever,
special
there's
concoctions?
there's a ton of people that have products that say this will cure a hangover, and they get reviewed. They get they get reviewed by the press, but they also get reviewed in the lab. Whoever comes up with that cure, we think the people that came up with Ozempic are super rich now.
Yeah.
Whoever fucking comes up with a cure for the
a hangover?
it's over.
It's
He's
over.
he's richer than Elon, richer than Bezos, 100%. There's no cure, right?
Okay, well that's good
there
to
isn't.
hear. I'm not doing
The only
thing.
and I always love these articles. They're like, we're gonna review all these different cures, and then at the end of every single article, they quote some doctor who says, "Look, the only way to not have a hangover is to not drink."
Yeah, that's
Well,
great.
nobody was reading that article.
That's not why I was.
to get to that point, and then feel bad, like, whoa, what kind of loser am I? Like I was just looking for a little hack here.
I was looking for a cure. You called me an alcoholic.
Yeah, obviously, but it's all about it's all about hydration. If you're
That's it.
that's what's
How much
happening.
water are you drinking on tour?
A lot,
Like fucking
Yeah.
gallons a day.
and you're not drinking. Obviously not drinking.
Salt tablets. You guys were.
The drinks have salt and sugar in them.
Now, could you feel a difference in altitude at different spots? Since we were just talking about altitude, like
So what's
if
funny
you know
with
if a race is
like
higher,
if you watch the tour and whether you're they're going up Alpe d'Huez or you're going up Mont Ventoux or the Tourmalet, you look like you're in Colorado, and those are the biggest mountains in Europe. You're never that high. Alpe d'Huez, the most iconic climb in the Tour de France, is the same elevation as Denver.
yeah,
So you're starting at zero. And you're
Yeah.
going so you get the difficulty of the elevation change
You get the
because
gain.
you have to get up there.
Yeah.
You get the gain,
Yeah.
the vert as we call it. But you never in the tour are you like, whoa, I feel like I'm at altitude.
really.
That never happens because you're going over 4 passes a day. You go over one, you come down, you're back to 1,000 feet. Go back up, go down, you're back to 1,000. Like you're very rarely at altitude, and
Yeah.
even when you are, it's not that high.
Right.
Ventoux is 6,500. I'd have
It
to
might
go back
look
and
like you're at 10 because of the
Yeah,
snow-capped
but it's
mountains
not.
and that sort of thing, but there's a prominence
look.
there. So
There's not a 10.
have you biked somewhere where you were like, damn, dude,
Well, if you any place,
Aspen?
yeah, if you
Yeah.
and when you first go there for
Yeah,
sure, like
yeah.
those for the first week, absolutely.
You think you'd be a good altitude athlete? This might be the gotcha part of the interview where I invite you to Killy one year. 19.
You have invited me.
So I'm just going to keep doing it. 19,341. You think you could smoke that? Probably, right?
How long is it? You
It's like
guys?
6 days.
Yeah, that's why I'd
you
never
could
done
smoke
it.
it. You could
Next
smoke
time, send out the invite where we go
Yeah.
up and down in a day, and I promise you I'll do it.
I'll go up and down in a day with you.
Yes. I don't want to spend six.
But
I don't
then
want
you
to go
gotta
that
pay
far.
for the
I don't like.
helicopter
I don't
to come
like.
pick me up.
I don't like traveling that far.
Fucking,
I don't like traveling.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you.
I like travel, but I don't. That's like long trips. I think my days of those are done. But 6 days is too long.
It's
but
too long. I'll get it shortened.
19,000 feet. Everybody's gonna feel.
Yeah, you
care
feel
who
it.
you-
Yeah,
yeah,
you feel
100%.
it. You feel it.
Are people with oxygen? They're not with oxygen.
We've had to get, I mean,
Like
I've
those
gone to
little
like 5
cans.
times and I've had to do oxygen once or twice where, you know, it's just so variable on how you're taking care of your body.
Right.
That's really what it comes down to. All the little things that you think you're
Hydration.
doing or not doing.
Hydration being the biggest
getting
one.
the calories down because at altitude you do not feel like eating.
Yep.
Eating the right
metabolism's
things.
higher.
Yeah. So it's the same shit you're doing. It's getting in tune with your body and figuring out, you know, like
Is it cold up there?
we just had a group summit last week in a fucking blizzard. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I took
I'm
this
out on
year
that
off.
trip.
So
I don't like
what are the other sports? We talked about football, but like endurance sports or like just other sports that you have a lot of reverence for with your background from a standpoint of, man, that looks fucking hard.
that I actually do, or just
That you haven't tried, that you're a
that
fan
I haven't
of.
tried.
I know I've heard
I
you
grew
talk
up
about
swimming.
swimming.
I love swimming.
As
Swimming
like,
is one of my favorite sports. Golf is one of my favorite sports. Boy, what would their
you said swimming was the hardest mental exercise.
I think, I think if you consider the GOAT of swimming, and I would make the argument that he's the GOAT of GOATs, is Michael Phelps.
You met him?
Yeah.
He's a nice guy.
He's a great guy.
Yeah. Built for swimming.
Complicated guy. He's absolutely built for swimming.
Like born to swim.
Yeah, somebody came down and said, okay, we're making you the GOAT, because everything about him was made to swim. But, dude, if you went back and cataloged his entire life's work in terms of training, what it took, the hours. I mean, I grew up swimming, so I know what 2-a-days are like. I know what it's like to get up at 5 and be in the pool at 5:30 and swim till school starts and get out of school and swim again. I mean, we're swimming. That's what he did, and, times 10, and you know, in a pool staring at a black line.
Yeah.
Like, there's not like 2 days a week where you get to go swim around with like, you know, tuna or anything. Like it's tough.
Yeah. Those triathlons, that's how you got into it. Like my buddy's done Kona. He just named Rick Peralt. He actually is a fan of yours, and we were talking, and you know, he was explaining some of the cycling stuff. But you know, the thing that I'm always asking him is like, when you're doing a triathlon, are you thinking about sharks?
What does he say?
He's like, fuck no.
No, I don't think sharks are. There's 1,000, 2,000 in Kona.
You'd have to be pretty fucking unlucky.
2,000 people in the water. Those sharks aren't. They don't want any of that.
They don't want to hear it.
They don't want any of that.
Okay, so that's not even a thing people talk about at those things.
I've never seen. I mean, I swim open water all the time. You see little, you know, reef sharks, but I've never come up on a great white, so I can't, or any kind of tiger shark.
Neither have I, and I won't, because I'm not getting in that motherfucker. Hey, so what's Kona like, man? Is it intimidating? Is it, you know, like to go do the biggest triathlon? Like,
I've never raced. I did the half Ironman in Kona. I never. In 2012, I was training to. That's when everything sort of came crashing down. I was back doing triathlons professionally and starting with half Ironmans.
Yeah.
So I did Galveston, Panama, Florida. I did Kona. I did the half Ironman in Kona. This is professionally, so I'm I was a 41-year-old guy. And then I flew to France, and I was about to start Ironman France. So it was going to be my first full Ironman in Nice.
Yeah.
And then the shit hit the fan, and I got pulled out, and then I never did Kona. But I mean, Kona's one of those special. I think all of Hawaii just has a special air to it. It's a very special place, and Kona as well. It's just super diverse. So much history there with the event. But dude, the Ironmans, I never did one, but halves are hard enough.
What's a half?
Is a half of a full.
No, I know, but give me the fucking metrics.
1.2 mile swim.
I did fucking geometry, motherfucker.
1.2 mile
It's not
swim.
even geometry, it's fractions.
1.2 mile swim, 56 mile bike, and then a half marathon.
56-mile bike, half marathon. So you're running like 12 miles or so.
13.1.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Are you, when you watch football, do you think people are crazy to play it?
I don't think they're crazy to play it. I think most parents are crazy to let their kids play it.
I would agree.
Yeah, and we had this very look. I have two boys. My son played football at Westlake, which is like playing.
It's a big deal.
That's the Notre Dame of high school.
It's like
pretty
Breeze,
much. Yeah,
right?
Breeze, Foles, Justin Tucker, a bunch of guys.
Yeah, Tucker. Yeah.
And so, but he was big. I mean, in high school, he was 260 pounds. He played O-line. You're like, all right.
Your son?
Yeah.
No shit.
Yeah.
How tall is he?
6'3".
What the fuck?
I know. I don't know what happened, man.
What age are you like, damn, this guy,
Yeah.
I can't tell him what to do anymore. You got to have.
So that I wasn't worried about. My 14-year-old, who's a freshman in high school, who now does not go to Westlake, goes to a private school, is 5'8" and 110 pounds and wanted to play football.
Yeah.
And he's playing private school football.
Right.
Which is like 1/100th of playing at Westlake.
Yeah.
And even then, man, I'd go to these games. I was like, I can't take it. Like, kids are getting fucking laid out, and I was like, and even he sensed it. He's like, I don't know if this is for me. So I'm glad that he's going to focus on basketball.
Yeah. I mean, listen, especially at the youth level.
If you're not going to play on Sundays, don't play the game.
Well, there's no way to know, so like.
Then if you don't really, if you don't think
try,
you have an outside chance.
Scholarship, for some people, I think, get an education. And the NIL money now is very.
Okay. If you don't think you're going to play on Saturdays or Sundays.
Yeah, you're not going to make money.
Right.
If you're not going to, and I would agree with you. I mean, like, listen, I'm not saying nobody should play football, but what I am saying is, like, my kids are going to wait until at least high school. They're going to, for tackle football. I think at the youth level, there's some really bad coaching.
Right.
And it's like, what is the point of building bad habits?
Yeah. This means a lot more coming from you than from me. Nobody's going to listen to me when it comes to
No, I think if I could, but you're the dad that didn't play that has to weigh that,
Yeah.
that outcome.
You just see it, dude. And maybe, I mean, we had times as a parent, and then you're in the stands with other parents where kids, I mean, there was a time where they had to bring the ambulance on the field. Like it.
The Hamlin thing last year was tough
for
all of us.
That just, yeah.
You guys had a guy pass away in, 95? Right in front of you guys on tour, right?
Yeah.
And that's not normal.
That is not. It hasn't happened since.
So there's been one tragic.
They have died in other races, but not. It's. I mean, a kid died last summer in the Tour of Switzerland.
No way.
Yep, and a professional, a good cyclist.
A crash.
Yep, off the side of the road.
How often are these crashes happening? And like.
Crashes happen every day.
Now, when a crash happens, it's pretty clear who's in the wrong. Yeah or no? Or
anything can happen.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much. Something can go wrong with the bike. I mean, look at 2 or 3 years ago. The lady, remember this, standing in the road with the sign.
With the fucking sign. Dude.
Okay, so whose fault was that?
I don't know.
Hers.
Yeah.
It was her fault.
Well, I thought
that
there might
crash
be,
never happens. Or, the way we design roads now, we call it road furniture with traffic control and pylons and speed, shit like that. Like those are the roads you have to. In the old days, you just went straight through, and now there's all these creative ways to control and slow down and sort of manipulate traffic. We have to get around that shit.
Yeah.
So people hit that.
Yeah.
Like one guy hits them, at least 4 or 5 or 10 or 50 other guys are going to go down behind him.
And how fast are they going at that point? Could they be going?
That crash with the lady, for example. They were going 35 miles an hour.
Jeez.
When you're going that fast, it's going to affect a lot of people.
Yeah.
You can't stop quick enough.
Damn, dude. So what's the biggest crash you ever saw? Not the most dangerous. Obviously, that was really tragic, but one that it was like a fucking pile up.
Oh, and some sprint. I mean, they crashed a lot in the sprints and in the road.
Be 40, 50 people. Easy.
Yeah, because it narrows up. typically people together.
Yeah.
Yeah, bad.
What
People ask me all the time what it's like to crash. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I do know, but I'm like, dude, just put on your bike stuff and have your wife or your buddy drive the car. Right?
Yeah.
You sit in the passenger seat, get all your bike shit on, put your helmet on, have them go like 30. Just go down the road right here in front of us, go 30.
Yeah.
And jump out of the car.
Yeah.
Yeah, you say it like that, and people, I'm like, that's exactly what it feels
Man,
like.
I had a bad bike crash in college.
Yeah.
I was going to dorms to visit some gal. I had a couple pops.
Yeah.
I got you guys probably never experienced this, but where your fucking handlebars go like this and you know it's over.
Speed wobble.
Is that what they call it? It was right on campus, dude.
Did you have your hands on the bars?
Hard to remember exactly how it went down, but
That sounds like your hands were not on the handlebars.
I don't know, man. But she had a first aid kit in the dorm room, so it was great. Her mom sent her to school with a first aid kit. She could be patching up some 280-pound idiot. Fell off a bike, trying to court the daughter. So what's the sport like now? Like, has it lost a lot of the luster? Because I feel like a lot of it is driven by star power.
Yeah.
And you guys were stars. And I don't know the sport well enough to know, but now is it different?
I think there are quite a few bona fide stars now.
Yeah.
I think the sport's for as good as it can be right now, for the way that it's structured and the way I won't bore you with the structure of the sport, but there are bona fide stars. I mean, there's 10 mega stars in cycling.
Who's the guy? Is there a the guy? And is that a problem if you don't have a the guy?
It is a problem, but the guy is probably Pogačar.
Yeah.
But right behind him is 8 or 9 other guys, huge names.
And is it a clean sport now?
Oh, I get asked that all the time.
Yeah. It's hard to know.
I think it's basically clean. I don't know. I don't have any connections to the sport. I don't ask.
Yeah.
Like, that's not my job. My job is to commentate on the sport and cover the sport in our own unique fashion. Like, if something happened, we would probably talk about it.
Yeah,
but,
you can react to
but
news.
I'm just talking about, I'm like every other dipshit that watches the race. Like,
is that how you feel?
100%.
Is it freeing to be a guy just podcasting and you can be wrong and you can just we can make objective comments that
and
people know
our main show, which is, we do all the races outside of the tour, we do virtual. The tour show is in a studio, is built out. Like, it's way better. Like, you can ham and egg it way better. But we work for ourselves. Right? We're an independent crew that we can say whatever the fuck we want to say, and there's no producer coming over to me from NBC like, hey dude, no more F-bombs.
Right.
Which that would just like, no, we do whatever we want.
Yeah.
And we know more than anybody.
Yeah.
So it's this fun combination of deep knowledge, experience, irreverence, freedom, like, just let it rip.
But that's what people want to see. They want to see people acting more like a regular person.
I mean, look, the numbers don't lie.
Yeah.
I mean, we do 250 to 400,000 downloads a day.
Yeah.
During the tour, a day.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
We might start a tour podcast.
Yeah.
If you're hearing that.
Yeah.
Damn, dude. But no, how's the reception? Like, it doesn't sound like you travel to events a lot, but like, I'm sure you've seen guys out who are you're a contemporary for a lot of these guys. And, even with the way the era had kind of a darker cloud over it, in retrospect, I feel like people have to look at you like one of like a Jordan kind of guy, especially for an American cyclist. Like, do you feel like you get the respect you deserve when you run into these guys, or is it complicated because of what they grew up hearing?
The younger guys?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, these 10 guys I just told you about, I haven't met one of them in person.
So this job doesn't ever take you to the front lines where you're holding a microphone talking.
No, man. People are always like, why don't you go to France and do your show over there? It'd be great. You'd be on site. I'm like, and leave Aspen in the summer?
Yeah.
Like,
I'm already in Europe, motherfucker.
I'm like, I wake up in my fucking PJs. I stumble down. I watch the race. I drink coffee.
Yeah.
I stumble over to the studio. I throw on a T-shirt, stumble over to the studio, knock it out, and then I go ride my mountain bike for 3 hours. Like,
Yeah.
and I never leave.
Yeah.
And it prints money. Like, what's wrong with that? Like, no.
Yeah.
So no, we don't. I never. We've had some folks on the show, so we'll
Zoom in.
people in. So that's cool.
That's where Zoom's nice.
Yeah, that's they're over there, and
You ain't
now,
going over there.
They're sitting in the team bus and 5G. They get it works, but no contact.
Yeah. Lance, I appreciate the time, dude.
Absolutely.
This has been a
been
pleasure.
fun. Yeah.
It's a world that I'm obviously not an expert in, and so it's cool to have you sitting here. Pick your
You
brain.
got my number. I know you're gonna have a lot of follow-up questions about cycling, but
Yeah, dude. 'Cause
No, I'm kidding.
I'm going to get a bike, bro. I'm going to get a bike. I want to go 35 down a hill.
how about I just let you borrow one?
Okay. Is it gonna hold me? I'm 250. Are we good?
It'll hold you. These bikes
Okay.
will hold anything these days.
Okay, brother. All right. Well, I
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks for
you.
having me.
Yeah.
Yeah, have fun in
Yeah, and
Austin.
thanks for all the work you did on cancer research and everything. I mean, as a philanthropist, I think what you guys did is amazing. So thank you, and thanks for coming into our orbit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, brother.
Anytime.
Yep.